Have you ever walked away from a conversation feeling strangely heavy, even though nothing bad happened to you personally? Maybe a friend shared their anxiety and you carried it all day as if it were your own. Or perhaps a family member was upset, and suddenly you found yourself lying awake at night replaying their emotions, worrying about problems that weren't technically yours. This invisible weight is what we can call emotional debt, a kind of hidden account in your mind where you keep paying interest on feelings that didn't even start with you. And the truth is, most of us carry these debts without even realizing it. We take on guilt, shame, fear, or responsibility for other people's inner worlds, and then wonder why we feel drained, overwhelmed, or stuck in patterns of self-blame. Today we're going to unlock this concept together. Why your brain internalizes the emotions of others, how these borrowed feelings become part of your identity, and most importantly, how you can return these invisible debts and reclaim your freedom. Because learning to recognize and release emotional debts is not about becoming cold or uncaring. It's about finally carrying only what is yours, so you can be more present and grounded in your own life. Let's start with why this happens in the first place. Human beings are wired for empathy. Your brain contains what neuroscientists call mirror neurons, cells that light up not only when you experience something yourself, but also when you see someone else experiencing it. This is why watching someone cry can make you tear up, or why you flinch when you see someone stub their toe. Empathy is a survival mechanism. It allows us to bond, cooperate, and form communities. But empathy has a side effect. Sometimes your brain doesn't just reflect another person's feelings temporarily, it absorbs them. Instead of feeling with someone, you start feeling for them, and then you begin carrying that feeling beyond the moment. It's like you took their emotional bill and put it in your own pocket, promising to pay it off later. Psychologists have noted that this pattern often starts early in life. If you grew up in an environment where you felt responsible for the moods of your parents, trying to keep the peace, prevent conflict, or make them happy, you likely learned to equate safety with carrying other people's emotions. The child's brain thinks, if I can make mom less anxious or dad less angry, then everything will be okay. That strategy may have helped you survive emotionally as a child, but in adulthood it becomes an unconscious habit. You keep stepping into roles that aren't really yours, managing the emotions of partners, colleagues, or friends as though it's your duty. And over time, this creates a backlog of what we're calling emotional debt. Unresolved feelings you didn't generate but still feel obligated to manage. Here's where the metaphor of debt is especially useful. Think about financial debt. Maybe you co-signed someone else's loan without realizing it, and now you're responsible for payments you didn't spend. Emotional debt works the same way. You agree silently and often unconsciously to take on responsibility for another person's inner state. Maybe you feel guilty when a friend is sad, as though it's your failure. Maybe you feel anxious when your partner is stressed, as though it's your problem to fix. Each time this happens, you're adding another transaction to your hidden account. And like financial debt, emotional debt accumulates interest. The longer you carry it, the heavier it feels. What started as one moment of sympathy can turn into chronic guilt, anxiety, or resentment years later. But why do these debts feel so sticky? Neuroscience again gives us a clue. Negative emotions, fear, guilt, shame, tend to be more memorable and more deeply encoded in the brain than positive ones. Evolution made it this way because remembering danger or social rejection increased survival chances. So when you take on someone else's negative emotions, your brain treats them as highly important data, reinforcing the memory and making it harder to let go. Add to that the cultural narratives many of us grow up with. Be selfless. Always put others first. A good friend never lets someone down. And you've got the perfect recipe for carrying burdens that aren't actually yours. Society rewards you for being the one who listens, absorbs, and supports, but it doesn't teach you how to return what doesn't belong to you. Now, here's the important part. Carrying emotional debt doesn't actually help the people you care about. Imagine if you tried to pay someone else's credit card bills forever. Not only would you run yourself into the ground, but they'd never learn how to manage their own finances. Emotional debt works the same way. When you absorb and carry someone else's emotions, you often shield them from their own responsibility. In the short term, it may feel like you're helping, but in the long run, it prevents both of you from growing. You become exhausted, and they miss the chance to face, process, and resolve their own feelings. True empathy isn't about paying someone else's emotional bills. It's about sitting with them as they learn to manage their own account. So how do you begin releasing these emotional debts? The first step is awareness. You can't change what you don't see. Start noticing when you feel emotions that don't seem to match your current situation. Are you feeling anxious, but nothing in your life explains it? Did that emotion begin after a conversation with someone else? Ask yourself, whose emotion is this? Sometimes just asking that question creates a shift. You realize, oh, this sadness isn't mine. It's my friend's grief, and I've been carrying it. Naming the source is like finding out whose bill you accidentally pocketed. The second step is reframing responsibility. When you feel guilty or anxious on someone else's behalf, remind yourself, their feelings are not failures I must correct. Their sadness doesn't mean I've done something wrong. Their anger doesn't mean I am to blame. This doesn't mean you stop caring. It means you stop confusing empathy with ownership. You can be compassionate without absorbing. A simple mantra can help here. I can support without carrying. Repeat it in your mind the next time you feel pulled into someone else's storm. The third step is practicing emotional boundaries. Boundaries aren't walls that cut you off. They're filters that let in what belongs to you and keep out what doesn't. One practical exercise is visualization. Imagine the other person handing you a heavy bag of emotions and visualize yourself gently handing it back. Not rejecting them, not abandoning them, but returning what isn't yours. This mental image reinforces your ability to separate your responsibility from theirs. Over time, it rewires your brain to stop automatically co-signing on emotional loans. Another strategy is journaling specifically about borrowed feelings. Write down situations where you felt weighed down after interacting with someone. Then write 2 columns, mine and theirs. Under mine, list what emotions and responsibilities are truly yours. Under theirs, list the emotions that belong to the other person. Seeing it in black and white makes the separation clear, and it helps your brain file the memories differently. Instead of reinforcing guilt or anxiety, you reinforce ownership and clarity. Finally, you can practice what I'd call emotional neutrality in presence. This means being able to sit with someone's feelings without absorbing them. It's like being a lighthouse in a storm, steady, present, shining light, but not swept away by the waves. This requires mindfulness, pausing, breathing, noticing your own body when someone shares strong emotions. Are your shoulders tightening? Is your chest heavy? Relax those muscles, breathe, and silently remind yourself, this is their wave. I am standing on my own shore. With practice, you can stay connected and compassionate without drowning in borrowed emotions. What's powerful about reframing emotional debt is that it gives you back agency. Instead of unconsciously carrying the weight of everyone around you, you begin to choose. You choose when to support, when to listen, and when to let go. You choose which emotions you process and which you respectfully hand back. And as you do, something surprising happens. Your own emotions become clearer. You stop confusing your identity with the noise of other people's pain. You realize that much of what you thought was your anxiety or your guilt was never yours to begin with. This clarity doesn't make you less empathetic. It makes you a more grounded, authentic, and sustainable source of support. In the second half of this journey, we'll go even deeper into how emotional debts shape identity, how they get passed down across generations, and how you can develop a personal toolkit for noticing, naming, and returning them. Because freedom doesn't come from carrying every burden. It comes from carrying the ones that are truly yours and walking lighter into a life where compassion is no longer confused with self-sacrifice. Another layer to emotional debt is how it shapes identity. Over time, the emotions you carry from others don't just weigh on you. They start to become part of how you see yourself. If you've spent years being the person who absorbs everyone else's struggles, you may have unconsciously built your self-image around being the responsible one, the peacemaker, or the strong shoulder to cry on. Those roles can feel comforting because they give you a sense of purpose, but they come at a hidden cost. You begin to define yourself by other people's emotions rather than your own. This can blur your sense of who you are when no one else is around. Ask yourself honestly, do you sometimes feel guilty for being happy when people close to you are struggling? Do you hesitate to celebrate your wins because someone else is having a hard time? That's the echo of emotional debt shaping your identity, teaching you that your worth is tied to carrying what isn't yours. This phenomenon can even pass through generations. Many families have unspoken rules about who carries whose emotions. Maybe a parent unconsciously handed you their unprocessed trauma, expecting you to be their confidant. Or perhaps grandparents who lived through hardship instilled a belief that it's selfish to prioritize your own feelings over the needs of others. These patterns become invisible legacies, debts passed down like heirlooms. You might be paying interest on emotions that started decades before you were even born. Recognizing this generational cycle can be both painful and liberating. Painful, because you see how much of your life has been shaped by dynamics that weren't really yours. Liberating, because awareness allows you to stop the cycle. You can choose not to pass these debts further, to your children, your friends, or your relationships. You can decide, this stops with me. So how do you develop a personal toolkit for returning these debts and living lighter? Let's build a practical framework step by step. First, practice emotional auditing. Just like you would check your financial accounts, set aside time to check your emotional accounts. At the end of a day or week, reflect. Which feelings were truly mine and which might have come from others? Write them down. For example, I felt anxious after lunch with a coworker, but nothing in my own life was stressful. That's a clue you've taken on something that belongs in their column, not yours. Second, learn to consciously decline new debts. When someone shares strong emotions with you, you have 3 possible responses. 1 is absorption. You take it on as your own. 2 is avoidance. You shut down and disconnect. But there's a third way. Presence without ownership. This is where you listen deeply, validate their feelings, but remind yourself internally, this is theirs, not mine. Practicing this response takes time, but it's like building a new muscle. Each time you catch yourself and choose presence without carrying, you're training your brain to stop signing up for invisible loans. Third, create rituals for releasing debts you've already taken on. One technique is what therapists sometimes call externalization. Write a letter to the person whose emotions you've been carrying, even if you never send it. In the letter, acknowledge their feelings with compassion, but also state clearly, this is not mine to carry anymore. Then symbolically release the letter, tear it up, burn it safely, or simply put it away. Another practice is visualization, as we touched on earlier. Imagine handing back the heavy bag of emotions to its rightful owner, not as punishment, not with anger, but as an act of clarity and respect. These rituals give your mind a concrete way to reset the boundaries between self and other. Fourth, strengthen your emotional core. The more grounded you are in your own identity, the less likely you are to mistake someone else's emotions for your own. Practices like mindfulness meditation, journaling, and self-reflection help you become familiar with your own baseline state. Ask yourself, what does my body feel like when I'm calm? What thoughts arise when I'm truly myself? The more you know this internal landscape, the quicker you'll notice when a foreign feeling intrudes. It's like recognizing a fraudulent charge on your bank account. You spot it immediately because it doesn't match your usual spending. Finally, embrace the philosophy that boundaries are not selfish, but generous. When you stop carrying debts that aren't yours, you actually show up for people in a healthier way. You're not weighed down, resentful, or drained. Instead, you bring clarity, stability, and genuine presence. It's the difference between trying to swim while carrying someone on your back versus throwing them a life preserver from solid ground. By standing firmly in your own emotional territory, you give others the space and dignity to work through their own. What you'll discover through this process is that many of the feelings you thought were part of your permanent identity, chronic guilt, free-floating anxiety, constant responsibility, were actually borrowed. Returning those debts creates space for new experiences, lightness, creativity, joy, and even a sense of authenticity you may not have felt in years. You'll realize that your true self is not the sum of other people's pain. Your true self is the one who chooses what to carry, and who finally understands that compassion does not require sacrifice of identity. So as you reflect on this idea of emotional debts, I invite you to ask yourself a simple but powerful question. Whose emotions am I carrying right now that aren't actually mine? Notice what comes up. Maybe it's a parent's disappointment, a partner's stress, or a colleague's frustration. Recognize it, name it, and then ask, am I ready to hand this back? Because the path to freedom begins not with carrying more, but with carrying wisely. And if this exploration unlocked something in you, if it helped you see your hidden emotional accounts more clearly, then share this video with someone who may also be weighed down without realizing it. Subscribe to Mind Unlocked, your toolkit for better thinking and a more meaningful life, where every idea is designed to help you understand your mind and live with greater clarity, honesty, and freedom.